Well, thank you so much for tuning into our podcast. This is the F5 Recovery Radio. This is One Pretty Ricky. I'm joined by my co-host Adam Martin, and we have a special guest with us today. We, of course, want to just thank the F5 Project for being one of our main sponsors for this show. And as Giving Hearts Day is coming up, we are really looking forward to having you support F5 Project. So continue to remember us, schedule those gifts, and let us know how we can continue to do what we do and be able to provide this podcast and continue to change so many lives here in North Dakota and beyond. So we're looking forward to this great show. We have our special guest, Tracy Reames, with us today, and we're looking forward to hearing a lot of great things from her. Tracy, we're super happy to have you.
Thank you.
Oh, we're going to go right into it. Oh, okay.
Oh, right.
I thought we were going to cut that.
Oh, should I cut it?
No, it's too late now, Ricky.
It's fine. The shout out to me can just be in the message. It's fine.
Okay.
1 second.
Oh,
We're good.
oh.
Oh,
There's a lot of
so should I
breaking the fourth wall here. Oh, we even got the fifth wall. He's talking back to us.
Is that how that works?
No, it's still a fourth wall. Oh, just like on Deadpool, he's like, that's like a 16th wall. Anyway, so Tracy's here with us today.
Yes.
Welcome to the shit show.
Thank you.
So Tracy is she's an attorney for Barkus Law Firm. Mm-hmm. Is that like is it like Barkus Law PC or?
Yeah, Barkus Law Firm PC.
Oh.
I guess is technically the
Yeah. You never see the PC part. I don't know. What is PC?
Yeah, what is PC?
Private corporation, I think, or something. I think it's just how many owners there are is what it is. I'm not involved in that, and I don't do business law, so don't.
She's like, again, please don't quote me.
Please don't. I don't know. I took business associations, one in law school, and that was that because it was on the bar exam, and then since then I've never done anything else with business law.
feel like that's
I don't know.
I always thought it had something to do with
like,
like accounting.
Yeah.
For some reason, because every accounting firm I see.
Maybe
has something like PC on their name.
I guess the only one I really see is DDC for like my dentist.
Wow, that's not even.
I hope my business association professor doesn't see this.
That's the only one I ever see is
we learned
LLC.
about this at one point, but that was like 10 years ago. I don't know.
Well,
That was not my strong subject.
So I know Tracy from when she was a Cass County assistant state's attorney. Mm-hmm. I guess I didn't really know. We didn't really know much of each other, heard of each other. But how long were you assistant state's attorney?
I think just not quite 4 years. And then I was a city prosecutor too before that for a year.
In Fargo?
Yeah, West Fargo.
Oh, West Fargo.
Yeah.
Under Michelle?
I think, she was the judge when I was,
And now Travis is the judge.
Trent,
Or Trent. I don't know, I always call him Travis for some reason. Looks like a Travis. Trent.
I'm going to call him that.
I did that one time to his face, and he just like looked at me. And I was like, oh, that's not your name.
Like, you know my name, Adam. I was like, oh, yeah, I do. I just messed up.
He did, Trent did, as judge for West Fargo Municipal, did a 1-day thing where anybody could just come to court and take care of their fines or warrants or whatever. Mm-hmm. And it was super cool. Oh. There was only a few guys that showed up because I think like people were like kind of suspect. Because I don't know if you know this, but Fargo has a history of like setting up events and saying it's for something else, and then people show up and then they arrest them.
What?
Oh, you didn't know about this?
No.
So the old chief of police.
Yeah.
I hope he's listening. Did an event. It was a combination between him and Laney, the old sheriff. Okay. But they did there was an Ozzy Osbourne concert that was happening in Fargo, and they did like a ticket giveaway or something like that. Yep. But they only sent the notifications to people who had active warrants.
That's why.
Yeah, and then they showed up and they arrested him. Dude, Ozzy found out and was pissed. Jeez. Yeah, dude. So when Trent came out with this idea to do that, I think people were just like, excuse me, they were a little fearful that they were going to show up and expect to like take care of their warrants,
right.
but they were going to go to jail.
Yeah.
And the reason people don't usually take care of their warrants, obviously, is because they don't want to go to jail. Right. And so only a couple people showed up, and I was there for a little bit of it when they showed up, and he kept to his word and took care of fines, took care of warrants, squashed them, you know, and it was cool. So he's a good judge. He's got a good heart.
Yeah.
It's too bad he's not like a district, like circuit judge.
Right.
That'd be awesome. Probably get a lot of shit for doing that.
I guess I don't think I could even think of a sick district judge doing that. Like, is there a rule against that? I mean, they can do whatever they want, right? But is it?
Yeah, no, I mean, you can have whatever. Well, Cass County has like, you know, a master calendar session. You can make a bench warrant appearance, you know, anytime you want. But yeah, sure. There's no guarantee like as to what will happen to you. You know, like. Yeah. If you just owe like $100 and you walk in with like the $100, odds are like you'll be able to most likely pay it and be done, you know. But if you got other problems going on, you may be not going home that day. Like
that would be the worst. Show up with a $100 bill. Like, yep, I'll be home.
Yeah, a lot of times if it's just money you owe, you know, if you pay it in full, like your warrant's done. But if you have like a missed court appearance or something, or if you have other issues.
We could do a whole episode on bail. Yeah. Like, it's stupid. Some of the like, but on the other, being that it's not regulate, like, I mean, there's statutes and stuff, and they have to stay within guidelines, base it on flight risk. You know, supposed to. Right. But like when we did the bail reform hearings out at the legislative session. Like, in my mind, bail is supposed to be ensure that you're going to show up to court, not ensure that you're going to pay your fines off. You know what I mean? Right. And so one of the things that the argument that the other side had made is that, well, we just want them to pay bail so that when the court process is done, that their money goes to the victims. Right. And I'm like, that's not innocent until proven guilty. You know, that's not flight risk. So it's just, I don't even think people even understand what bail is supposed to be for, other than it's money. Right. You know, so anyways. Yeah. Today we want to talk about, you're gonna deal with a lot of squirrels on this, especially in this topic.
That whole bail has to be a whole other episode.
Yeah.
There's just a lot.
On and on. So back in, I don't know when it was probably 6 years ago, maybe 4 years ago, there was a new law that went into effect. Originally, it was the criminal record seal law. When it first came out, not a lot of people could participate in it because there was some verbiage in the code that, so for instance, if I had committed a felony in 2000 and then another one or a misdemeanor in 2003, and then I committed a felony in 2010, and then in 2020, wanted to seal my record, the only one that I could seal would be the felony from 2010 because I had committed a crime within 5 years of that first felony. Right. And obviously that doesn't make sense that I can seal the most recent one and not the other one because of that. So there was a lot of debate around that, and so went to the Supreme Court, all that stuff, and so eventually we went back to the legislative session, changed it to where it's from the last crime on, and not in between. And so since then, I believe a lot of people have participated in this law, and so I get a lot of questions about it. Between, what is a pardon, what's an expungement, what's a criminal record seal in North Dakota. And Tracy has helped a lot of people in a variety of counties participate and get criminal record seals. So let's start with one. What is the difference in North Dakota between pardons, expungements, and seals?
So a lot of these terms are used interchangeably. When I get contacted, a lot of people use expungement and criminal sealing as the same thing, and they're not. It's in North Dakota, expungement is really, really limited. Expungement is essentially like the deletion of your criminal record, and not many people are going to have circumstances where that would be the path that you take. You pretty much right now, I think it's like if you're a victim of human trafficking and you commit certain offenses while you're a victim of human trafficking, you later can file to expunge those convictions.
Oh.
It's if you were convicted of possessing less than an ounce of marijuana, you can file a petition to expunge, which, I mean, I don't know if anyone really cares about marijuana anymore, so...
I don't.
Yeah.
I mean I'm in recovery, but I care. For
and that's
me.
such a small amount that anything bigger than that doesn't qualify for the expungement process. And then I know in the expungement law, there's juvenile records, which are confidential anyway. There's a process where after, I think it's like 10 years, you can apply for an expungement on those. And then there's certain things where, like, if your case gets tossed out because of like an unconstitutional arrest or something. So basically anything resulting in like a conviction, the expungement process is not right now for you. It's the criminal sealing process, which that's different because sealing your record, it's not like the court isn't going in and hitting delete, on their database. The record still technically exists, but they put I call it like the lock on it, where like the general public, when you search on ND courts, the criminal record search, it's not gonna be visible. And that counts towards court records and prosecution records. So someone too, technically, if they tried to contact the prosecutor's office, then the prosecutor's office wouldn't be able to give their record out of it. So yeah, the short end of that is sealing. It exists, but it's in a very limited capacity. So the prosecutor could see it, I guess, down the road if someone was getting charged with, a new crime after they had sealed their previous record, they could see that in the past someone had, sealed some criminal history, while expungement, it's deleted. So it's different. A lot of people, even they contact me, call it expungement, and it's not the same thing.
Right.
Criminal laws, change all the time, and, one day in North Dakota, maybe, the expungement process will be made more broad. I mean, to me, that's what makes sense, I think, to do that, because expungement is more of a term than of what people know, versus sealing your record. They're used interchangeably a lot, but they're not exactly the same thing.
So where would a pardon fall on that, on those three kind of terms?
So a pardon is more after you've been convicted, completed your sentence. And I don't even know, because I haven't done a pardon.
Okay.
I don't know if there's a time requirement or not. You can apply in North Dakota for a pardon, which is basically being essentially, I think, forgiven for your
I think
offense.
it's like 5 years off paper for it's similar to the criminal record seal.
Okay, yeah. For criminal record seal, it's 5 years for a felony from the completion of your sentence or probation, whichever is latest. So that's the thing too with the sealing. If you plead to a felony and you get convicted, and then say you get 90 days in jail, but then you get 2 years of supervised probation. After you complete the probation is when the clock starts. So it's not always going to be 5 years exactly from when you pled guilty in court, or you went to trial and got convicted. You got to complete probation too.
And I think you can check the North Dakota courts, because it should say that the date on there when it's closed. Right?
Yeah,
Or maybe you got to check the paperwork and see the probation time.
Yeah, so they'll close your case after the judgment's issued, but it gets confusing with probation, because sometimes if you go on probation and you complete it, say you get 2 years of probation and you complete it in one shot with no issues, sometimes probation even petitions the court to release you early, if you complete everything and they don't really find the need to supervise you anymore. But that's not always apparent in the court records of what happened. So it gets a little confusing.
So when you've been doing these record seal petitions, have you found them to be pretty complicated because of probation or anything?
I have a questionnaire that I've drafted that I have clients fill out that kind of answers a lot of questions for me before I even when I do consults, I look at the case at issue that someone's contacting me about, because usually, I have a bunch of questions about, the case, and did they complete probation? Especially now as we're seeing older cases that people want to try to seal from, like, I say old, I mean like the early 2000s and stuff, which really, I mean, isn't that long ago, but the court.
Yeah. It was 24
I know,
years ago.
Crazy.
Yeah.
Yeah. Like the court, though, like just how the docket was done was a little different. And then you have the added thing is every county, they do their court dockets a little different. So that also gets a little confusing. It's hard. It's harder to get information from certain court dockets. And sometimes you have to contact the clerk. So a lot of times people are pretty good and they know generally when they got off probation, or it's pretty easy to verify. You can like contact probation and find that out. A lot of people know, but there's a lot of like moving pieces to it though, for sure.
Okay.
That can put a wrench in it.
Well, I went through the record seal process. Had an attorney rep me, and it all worked. It was crazy to go from like seeing. I mean, I still have a record, but like not seeing it on the North Dakota court's website, like it was just gone. But I think the coolest part from my side of having something sealed is you do get a document from the judge saying that you've been rehabilitated. And that piece has been very helpful. Like whenever, because if it's sealed, does it exist? Right? It does still exist. So when you apply for jobs and stuff, I think some people think, it depends on what philosophy you want to follow on it, I guess. A personal philosophy. Should you still put it down as a crime you committed on a job application if they ask or whatever? Some people say yes, because it still exists, even though it's been sealed. Mm-hmm. But if you do, then you have a document that the judge says that it's been sealed, you've been rehabilitated, and then you can present that. And I've found that almost more powerful than it just them finding out and you not saying anything, being upfront about it. So that was pretty cool to get. In my particular case was the judge who sealed my record was the same judge who prosecuted me, 15 years ago or whatever when it was. Mm-hmm. And that was that was interesting because when I heard he was the one who was handling it, I was like, And then it was also Ryan Youngren was the state's attorney on it. And I was like, oh, this isn't going to work.
Did you have a hearing?
I didn't even have a hearing.
Okay.
They just, it all went right through. They called the victims, and the victims all said that they were cool with it. And then even in there, when Tristan, Judge Vanderstreek, put in the notes at the end or whatever for the reasons why he was doing, he said that I was living an exemplary life or whatever. And it's probably something that he says, but it's cool when you hear it about you, right. Because he was the prosecutor for most of my crimes back in the day. And so it was just kind of like
he'd be like, Mr. Martin's back.
And actually,
just kidding.
Nicole's dad was my attorney.
Oh, Jeff. Okay.
Jeff was my attorney during that, and so one of the last times I got arrested was I was on the run. I was on probation in like multiple counties, and they were all trying to track me down. I was drunk. I decided, I don't know why, because I know I had warrants out. I know that the police were looking for me, and I still decided I'm gonna go to Dempsey's and the bar downtown. And I go there, and then someone found out that I was there, that I had a warrant, and they called the police or whatever. And so the bartender comes up to me and is like, Adam, the cops are looking for you. They're in the back or they're in the front. And I was like, thanks, bro. Finished my drink, ran out the back door, took off my hoodie, threw it in the dumpster, got rid of my hat, started searching cars. And I get into this car, and I'm going to hide in there until the cops leave. That was the whole plan. And while I was sitting there, I noticed that the keys were in the ignition. And so then I was like, oh, well, apparently God wants me to have this car. So I start the car, I start driving around. I was like waving at cops, and so then I
took your hoodie and your hat off so they don't know it's you.
I mean, they
Just
know.
a nice young man enjoying the nightlife of downtown Fargo.
Yeah.
Waving at cops. Yep. Not odd at all.
Just, dude, I was psycho. And the reason I went back is because I was staying with a girl that I had met like a couple weeks prior, and she was like letting me crash at her house and get drunk all the time, and so I went back. And when I went in the back door, I heard the bouncer say, "That's him." And all of a sudden the cops came they like bum rushed me and then arrested me. I still had the keys to the car in my hand, right? See, she knows what I'm talking. That's another felony, right? Yeah. And so I'm like, and they pat me down, and they don't open up my hands. And so I still have the keys, and they put me in the back of the cop car. And if you've ever been in the back of a cop car, anytime they search it, right? And I know they will, and you can't hide anything in there anyways. So I'm like, how am I gonna get rid of these keys? If they find these keys, I'm definitely going to prison. Right. As of right now, I just have to deal with my warrants. Right. You know what I mean? And so I put them between my butt cheeks, and my plan was to get into the jail and flush them. If you've ever seen the toilet, they're like industrial grade. You can flush a pop can. Like that hasn't been opened, and that was my whole goal. So I get to the jail, and I forgot they had them.
Keep clenching.
Yeah, I forgot
they must have not felt that great. I don't know.
It was not comfortable. It was not comfortable at all. And I'm like a psycho, right? So I'm just like. Anyway, so I get to the jail lobby. There's like 7 police officers, like 4 to 8, who knows how many jail deputies. They're all in this lobby, and it almost seemed like they were congratulating each other and stuff, and like attaboys, and like you're in the locker room of the football game. And I was just getting like pissed, right? And then they were like, "You got to walk through this metal detector," and I was like, "Shit." And so I walked through it, and it didn't go off. And I was like, "Oh, awesome!" Either, I must have a really big ass.
The old Martin behind coming through again.
And so then, I'm like, I'm in, like Flynn, right? I'm gonna get these keys in there. I'm gonna flush them. I'm not gonna catch another charge. And all of a sudden I start getting like cocky, and I start talking shit to the Fargo Police Department. Oh, no. And next thing I know, I'm in that 5-point restraint chair. And now I got keys in my butt, like I'm strapped down, like it is very uncomfortable. And so, anyways, fast forward, I went through a lot of emotions. I was severely drunk, mentally ill. I puked on myself. I pissed myself. Like it was a bad deal. And so I got halfway out of the chair, right? And I was like, now, like my self-esteem's getting better. And I'm like scooting this chair over to the toilet because they got me in the white rubber like room or whatever, the suicide room. And I'm about to put the keys in the toilet, and all of a sudden the little towel that like covers the window of the door or whatever, it moves, and I hear a jail deputy. She's like, "Oh my God, he's out." And then they came busted in there, and they're like, it was a mess, man. I'm like full of liquids, right? And so they're like taking my clothes off or whatever, and then when they pull my boxers down, they see Pikachu like hanging out of my ass, and they're like, "He's got keys." So the funny part of this story, not that there hasn't been this funny, is that they weren't even the keys to the stolen car. They were the keys that belonged to the girl that I was staying with, her van or something like that. So she had to come to the jail and pick up her keys in a biohazard bag. Oh my God. My representative was Jeff. That's the whole comes around. So Bradall comes the next day. And he's like, I was like, "Dude, I'll go to Teen Challenge. I'll do whatever." And he didn't charge me anything. Man, get me emotional thinking about it because nobody showed up. And I didn't even know Jeff that well. And so he pulled me into the client attorney room, and he called Tristan. And he was like, "Hey, I got Adam Martin here. He's got a couple felonies. I'm hoping we can get him to he's got felonies in other counties. Hoping we can just get him plead guilty, get him transferred over." And Tristan's like, his words were, he was like, "Oh, yeah, that's fine." And then there was a pause. He's like, "Wait a minute. Is this the guy with the keys in his ass last night?" And then Jeff hits mute. looks at me and he's like, what? And I was like, dude, it was a long night, bro. So that's my story with Jeff. Will always forever be in my heart because he, even after hearing that story, he still repped me, still got me like no probation, no fines, no nothing. Got me to just plead guilty and then go to treatment. That was the time I was supposed to go to prison. I've never been to prison, and it's partly because of Jeff that I'm probably better today because I got to go to treatment instead of go to prison. So, and that's her coworker's dad. That's why I'm bringing it all together. I'm trying to.
That's cool.
We offer share with Jeff.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
He's a good dude.
He's lots and lots of experience, so we can
So,
pick his brain.
you're since dealing with so what's your of all the criminal record seal petitions that you've done, how many have you not been able to achieve because of like red tape or?
I mean, usually when people reach out, I can, I'll ask them for their case number that they, and sometimes if they don't know, I'll just ask them for their name or any other legal name they've had, and I can usually find it. Sometimes when I look, it's just they don't meet the criteria. It's either it hasn't been 5 years since the felony conviction, or they're still on probation, or it hasn't been 3 years since the misdemeanor, or they had picked up like a new charge since, or it's something like that where they're just not going to qualify right now. And so like if it looks to me like they don't qualify, I mean, I just tell people that, because obviously we're not going to go through the process of, trying to seal it. Usually I'm able to direct people to that. Those more the people I turn away because they're just not going to qualify. They just need to wait longer. Or sometimes, and the other nuance of this is, it's you can't have been charged with anything like in any state. So someone maybe has, 3 years since their misdemeanor offense in North Dakota, but then they'll be like, oh yeah, but then I got this misdemeanor in like Minnesota or, South Dakota or something, like last year. And so then they got to wait, and so people don't always realize that too. So it's not just North Dakota. You can't have been charged, convicted anywhere of anything. The coolest part of the sealing process, one of the petitions I did, it was the first one in that particular county. So so the clerks and everyone was trying to figure out like what the hell to do with it after it was granted, you know what I mean? Because it was like, and it still is kind of a new process, I feel like, because it's not done a whole lot. I mean, it's becoming more, I think, as more people become aware of it, of the ability to do so, but it's still kind of new. Especially in some of the smaller counties that maybe they've done one or two or haven't seen it at all. But.
What I would like to look into is if someone goes through a pardon process and they've already went through a sealing process, if they're going to be able to, if the governor can still pardon, because those crimes technically still exist. Right. So I would assume that if the governor pardons an entire criminal history, that those would have to be a part of it or whatever, and that he would have the power to do that even though they've been sealed. You think?
Yeah, I mean, we'll have to try it with your record and see what happens.
We'll have to try
just have to. Yeah. And a lot of this, when I got into doing this, I mean, the first ones I did, I did pro bono because, like, I wanted to learn how to do this because the law, I mean, it's not this super easy statute to follow. No. There's a lot of requirements of what has to be in the petition. I mean, there's criteria that the court looks at, right? So they look at like what you've done since your conviction, what rehabilitation have you done? And so for that, I like to get information on treatment clients have done, what has their involvement been in the community, whether volunteering, for certain things or just in general, like what have you been up to? They look at the thoughts of the victim. They contact the victim and get their thoughts. They can also contact, the law enforcement involved in the case to get their thoughts. They look at the time since the offense, severity. I mean, there's a lot of different criteria that they're looking at, but and I have no idea where I was going with this, what even the question was. Well,
I went like on a squirrel in my head and I started thinking about all my past crimes or whatever. I'm like, man, I need to, because Christy's going through the pardon one in Minnesota or whatever. And like, if you get, there's there's a lot of stuff that you get to do if you get the records like erased.
Right.
You know, like I think some people get a little freaked out when they hear people who have felony backgrounds wanting to like own a gun or like go hunting. You know what I mean? Like, do you really want to go hunting, or you just want to be a felon with a gun? You know what I mean? Like, no, I would really, like, I'm 42 years old and I never got to go hunting. Right. Ever. And I would love to go like hang out with the boys and go, you know, instead of being that guy when they're planning a hunting trip and be like, I'll see you guys when you come back. Right. You know, like, it would be nice to be a part of that. And that's like one of the benefits of having like the pardon, because I mean, we have pretty good gun law, like when it comes to restoration of rights and stuff in North Dakota. The only people who can't absolutely are one who don't have the gun rights or whatever due to the felony or whatever. They have to wait a certain amount of time. But there's a federal ban for people with even misdemeanor domestic assaults. You know that. But I just found out that if a governor pardons that crime or whatever, that that you can have your gun rights restored. Right. So I was like, that seems weird that a governor can have more power than the federal government when that, you know what I mean? So I think it's still, how do you interpret the laws?
Yeah, I think this is new enough still that there's going to have to be further clarification as new scenarios come up, because, I mean, everyone that contacts me too, I mean, everyone kind of has a different story as to like what their criminal history background is. Some people, there's just one file they want to try to get sealed. Some people have, you know, I helped somebody, I think it was like 4 or 5 files, you know, and they qualified on each of them, but it was, you know, it's a similar petition on each, but you still got to look at what, you know, the underlying offenses and stuff like that. But it's, it just depends. But I think you're right. As more and more legislation is going to have to be done to clarify all of this. Yeah. And already the sealing thing too. I mean, there's more nuances in there. I mean, yeah, if you are convicted of a crime where you lose your gun rights, I mean, I believe then you have to wait 10 years to even try to seal that. So there's extra like exceptions in there. That adds on time period. So it gets confusing. And then I think the biggest thing is a lot of people, they just don't know, like, when am I eligible? Yeah. You know, and so, because, statutes are confusing, but there's so many exceptions with this law. And then you have DUIs, which is the other one, like B misdemeanor DUI. Like, normally you think, okay, I got convicted of a B misdemeanor after 3 years. Well, no, it's 7 for a DUI. You got to wait to try to seal your record. So that's an exception. Like, that's a difference between, you know, the other misdemeanors.
Are the DUI seals or whatever, are they automatic?
No.
They're not automatic?
No, you can attempt to seal your DUI record after 7 years after you haven't had anything. And I think probably the intent behind that is because if you get a second one within 7, you know, it's enhanced and everything. But it's not the same. It's a similar, like, sealing process, but you got to wait longer. So, because normally B and A misdemeanor under the sealing law, it's 3 years from release of probation or your sentence, but DUI is the exception, the misdemeanor exception. So it's different. So there's all these weird, you know.
And even with that, it's only for agencies to like seal it or whatever. So there's private companies out there that are harvesting records. Right. You know, so like when an HR company does a background check, they're not just doing it with state agencies. They're doing it with like companies that are for profit that are harvesting like tons and tons of information. So even if you know, like mugshot companies, like there's mugshots on some mugshotpeople.com or so, you know, that still exists there, and they're not held to the same standards as state governments. So if they're told to seal that, it doesn't mean that those are sealed too. Yep. There's probably a business idea out there it'd probably be attorneys, like doing the due diligence of where these are and then like sending, because they passed that in legislation with mugshots or whatever, that if you come across a company, you can have a civil case against that company from North Dakota if they do not remove that mugshot after your record's been sealed. I'll send it to you. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, and I don't know who the burden, and then if the burden falls on the person who got it sealed, to contact them and say, hey, this has been sealed now, you know.
Yeah.
But really, our court records, I mean, it depends on how an employer is looking, you know, at someone's, if they're going to background check them. Like on ND courts, you know, anyone can go on there and type in a name and do a search, and it's free. So I would assume a lot of employers are using that because it's a quick search where, you know, you can see someone's record. But yeah, you're right. I mean, if someone's doing a more in-depth background check, or if it's a job that requires certain clearances, or it's, you know, there's nothing preventing anyone from like every day going on ND courts and seeing what the new criminal filings are and like screenshotting those and keeping those. So like, I mean, they could exist still.
Well, we did a background check with the Attorney General's office. They are not held to the same standard because they don't even, I'm pretty sure they don't even use North Dakota courts. I think they use police records when they do their background checks, because like when I did mine, I think I have maybe 2 felonies left that are on public record or something. And so when we just, for shits and giggles, did my background check, came back and showed that I had like 7 because of all the times that I had been charged with other felonies, even though I hadn't been. And I was like, that's not. And then I go to North Dakota courts and it's like, well, it says I have 2. You know what I mean?
Yeah, because this process, it affects court records and prosecution records is how the law is currently written. Right. And so technically, you know, like prosecutors and law enforcement are separate entities. So a record of an arrest, or I've also gotten the question about, you know, when someone's been like fingerprinted, and like it led to a conviction and then they got their case sealed, the court and prosecution records are sealed, but like your fingerprint records, I mean, the cops those are still going to be on file, you know, like this law doesn't magically get rid of all of that.
But a pardon would.
Yeah, that's a good question, actually, as to like how,
well, I guess I don't know.
Law enforcement would have to do with your file, if it would just be marked as pardoned, or it actually would have to be deleted, or how that would work.
That's a good, we'll have to look into that. Because in Minnesota, it's written right out in your application process that if you are pardoned, that all police records, all agency records, everything is deleted. Right. And so that would be nice.
Yeah, and I'm sure in the North Dakota law, I have not personally done a pardon in North Dakota. I want to try to pardon someone, so if anyone wants to try to be pardoned, let me know. But because it's always good to learn the process, but it's something you don't, you know, this just wasn't a thing people tried to do necessarily. It's becoming more and more common where people are trying to seek relief of, you know, since the sealing criminal records, I think law came out, then the expungement process and pardon process is becoming more well known. But I haven't even done a pardon, so I'm not sure exactly the nuances of like how then it trickles down to every agency's records, you know, and then how it would work, like you said, for like the for-profit companies that have already like sucked your data out of the system, like how then that works.
Right. Yeah.
I mean, with the internet age now, it's like, I mean, I think you just have to assume that even if like you get something erased or forgiven, like it's still going to be out there in some capacity.
Yeah, nobody's holding the Forum or Valley News Live to deleting that stuff.
Well, that's a good point too. I mean, like you Google, or someone shared a news story on Facebook. I mean,
right.
Like, let's say you get a pardon on a case you had. Well, if somebody like posted about it on Facebook, like there's no mechanism like that directs them to have to like go delete their post, you know. So there's unfortunately there's lots of like random little ways it can still trickle down.
Well, it would probably, I mean, you could, it would just cost money, because you probably need an attorney. You'd need like a cease and desist or something, some kind of civil lawsuit, like if you don't delete that, we're gonna sue you for
libel. Right.
What do they call it? Defamation or something like that? I don't know. Yeah. But it's even then, that's a stretch. You know, people can say whatever they want, which I appreciate. I appreciate the freedom to, but I also don't appreciate people who abuse that to just make your life worse. Right. You know, like if you're doing it for public safety, like even back to the whole bail, you know, the idea of eliminating cash bail was that it's creating more homeless people then it's actually creating public safety. It's actually a burden, by putting people in jail for 3 weeks, waiting to go to court for something they're not even going to go to jail for, or prison or anything like that. And then, could you go 3 weeks without pay and still be able to pay your rent? 95% of North Dakota couldn't, So then they can't pay their rent, and then they get evicted, and now they're homeless, all because they couldn't pay a $500 bail. That doesn't sound like justice or public safety. So anyways, I don't even know where I was going with that. I just get me all riled up about the system right now.
All right, we're going to pause your squirrel so we can thank some sponsors.
Okay.
Adam will take some deep breaths.
Well, of course, we want to thank the F5 Project, the Ridge Treatment and Reentry Center, and of course, our brand new sponsor, GoAwayBear.com, for sponsoring our podcast. We appreciate them for just wanting to contribute financially to this. And of course, if anyone's listening and you want to continue to support us as well, please subscribe on Spotify, we're on YouTube, we're on just all the different things. Please continue to support us and help us be able to do this and be able to get the information out. And so, Tracy, you kind of talked a little bit a while ago talking about like the process for clients and people who wanted to get things sealed. What are some things that you could kind of share for just on the opposite end on like maybe victims who are like, oh my gosh, who don't want this seal to happen because they don't want the person that harmed them to be able to have that? Is there anything that you can kind of share for those?
Sure. I guess anytime a new law, like something like this is passed, there's a lot of like unknown questions, when new legislation is passed. So everybody that has a stake in it, prosecutors, defense attorneys, crime victims, people who have been, prosecuted and convicted, like everyone's going to have questions like, how is this going to impact me? Or am I going to be wronged? Victims who have gone through the system, am I going to be, wronged again? So one of the criteria for criminal record sealing that the court has to consider is the victim's input on it. And so my understanding how that works is then once the petition is filed, it's served on the prosecutor, and they do their due diligence. I think they, will look at the criminal history of that individual, like the age of the offense. They'll probably go pull their file, honestly, and reread it and see like what the police reports are saying. But one of the things that they have to do is they have to attempt to contact the victim to get their input. And that's optional whether the victim wants to give input. Sometimes if they don't care, like Adam gave an example, like, I don't know, did your people write in saying that they supported you, or did they just not kind of respond?
I'm not really sure. Okay. I know that they reached out to them, and I feel like, if I remember correctly, in the paperwork, it said that they didn't have issue with it. Or something like that. So,
yeah, and so I don't know, and obviously, the thing that can get dicey is someone can apply for this. It can be years later. People's address, things like that, change. So, I think they have victim witness coordinators at the state's attorney's office. I think they have access to databases. They can try to find people's phone numbers and things like that. But yeah, if you're a crime victim and you're concerned someone's going to try to steal something and you just want to have a say either way, you can contact the victim witness coordinators and update your contact information. But that's one of the things that the court has to consider. Now, there's other criteria too, but that is one of the factors. So it's not an automatic process. Someone says, I want my record sealed, that if the prosecutor says, okay, yeah, we don't oppose this or we take no position, that doesn't mean that the victim doesn't get a say either, And the court can have a hearing too, where they have the parties come in and they can have further argument on it if they're conflicted. So the idea of this law is that kind of all interested parties get a say. Even law enforcement that were involved in the arrest and the case also can weigh in. And then sometimes you have law enforcement that are, the victims in the offense, like if it's an assault on a police officer, things like that. So the intent, I believe, is that, everybody that's involved has a say. That's the idea of this process. And then in the end, the ultimate decision is up to the judge, but that's the idea. Right. So, I guess I'd say it doesn't mean it's automatically going to happen. And there's time periods, there's criteria, there's exceptions out there that are, that are designed. It's not like someone can go plead guilty and then like the next week ask to seal the record. It's not going to happen like that or anything.
And I would definitely recommend using an attorney like Tracy, because if it does go to an oral hearing, like it's going to be you against the prosecutor. You know what I mean? And I know of one person who did it by themselves, and she is super smart. So it was, and she was very like the tenacity, like the just constantly going out, you know. But most people won't be able to. In my opinion, I don't think I could have even filled out the paperwork.
Right.
You know, and petition
and it's not
the
to
court.
say that you can't, because I mean the state has their, I don't know, the infographic of like these are all the steps that you have to do.
Yeah, from the state. Like it is insane. Like reading through it is like reading radio advertising.
Well, I think
so it's like
the self-help center has like a general guide, but they don't draft like the forms for it. And there's many requirements of what has to be on those forms. And then the problem is like if you do, like I file a criminal petition or petition to seal someone's criminal record and stuff, and then it's granted. Somebody then that wants to do it on their own, they can't go pull that case and like look at the documents I use because it's sealed, right? So you can't just go like take someone's forms or whatever. But there's a lot that's required to be in the forms, and so it's not just like this one-page petition ever, you know. So it's, and then the other thing too is with criminal record sealing is if the judge denies it, you can't appeal to the North Dakota Supreme Court like you can in like if you have a case at the district court level and
which is ridiculous.
You go to trial and you get, let's say you get convicted and then you want to exercise your right to appeal. With this, in the law specifically, you cannot appeal to the North Dakota Supreme Court, the denial. You have to wait 3 years and then you can try again. Yeah. And then if you're trying to steal a municipal court record, you can appeal to the North Dakota District Court, but then they're like the final say. Like if you get denied there, then you can't go to the Supreme Court. So, which
totally isn't fair, because if the judge does grant it, the state's attorneys can appeal it. Because that's how I found out about one of the cases or whatever, is because it was actually Vanderstreet granted the petition to seal the record. And then the state's attorneys appealed to it, so it would go to the Supreme Court because they needed to get an opinion on something, right? And then the Supreme Court came back and said that the state's attorneys were right, and then they reopened the record, and that was what triggered us to go back to legislation, because it fell in that criteria of crimes that happened within that 5-year period. Right. I was like, that's not really fair that we can appeal, but you can. Right. You know what I mean? But it's written in the law. So it's like, well, guess I'm just a guy. Yeah. So, do you know what I'm talking about?
No. I don't.
I'll show it to
you. Yeah, it's interesting, and there's probably a lot of rationale behind it. I mean, I'm sure the Supreme Court, then they'd be kind of almost acting like the district court, like they'd have to pull the record and see like, you know, what's in it. I mean, the judge has to make findings. So whether they're going to approve it or deny it. But
that's the only time that I've ever had a conversation with the Chief Justice, because I emailed him, because it was actually kind of a cool process how it all worked out, because Vanderstreet sealed the record, the state's attorneys appealed it, and so when it went to the when it went to the Supreme Court, they used his initials because it was technically sealed.
Oh, sure.
Which was kind of cool that they were following suit on it. And so then when I emailed the Chief Justice, I was like, just so we're clear, like you guys are having a conversation about a record that doesn't exist. Right. You know what I mean? Like how can you appeal something that doesn't that's sealed? Right. And he gave me this great, like he actually spent the time and typed out a bunch of stuff to me, and but then they came back and they opened it back up because of the criteria, and they even said in there, they're like, the legislators need to do a better job. Right. And I was like, it's well done.
Different branch.
Which they did.
Well, yeah, and that's one of the really hard parts about when you're trying to passing like criminal justice reform, because especially something like this with expungement and sealing records, there's so many nuances and there's so many different like hypothetical situations that like legislation can't anticipate and address everything. So then like new scenarios constantly come up, and then our legislature meets once every 2 years, one session every 2 years. So then it's like, in the meantime, you can have some issue that like, well, then we got to kind of go resolve this. And then if you're not kind of in like the thick of it doing, you know, sealing records or someone that's somehow involved in it, you know, you're not really going to understand like why, you know, this wording is important.
Yeah, you never know how it's going to play out. Legislative intent doesn't always have the outcome that was intended, because then it falls on interpretation, you know.
Oh, because I've had a lot of people contact me. It's like truly that believe sealing their record, it's sealed like everywhere.
Yeah.
And I mean, it's not the case. Can it help someone? Certainly. Because I've had people where it's helped them, you know. But it's also, it's not though this like everywhere in the world now your record is sealed and not available. That's not what this law is. So I just want to be clear on that. But it's confusing because that's what it's called, like criminal record sealing, but it's not really that.
I think that when we go, if we ever go back to legislative assembly to pass a bill, I think that one, we should expand, like what we were talking about earlier, expungements on, you know, on having like a real process for expungements on crimes and not just the few, right? And then two, I think that we should create the criminal record seals to be automatic, right? So, but not disruptive to wanting to expunge them later. So like once you've committed a crime, once you've completed everything, 5 years later, if it falls into that criteria, it just automatically seals, right? Because in like Seattle or I don't know, they had that clean slate bill or something, and they to not burden the courts, they just created automatic expungements for like certain crimes, like drug crimes and whatever, and it's going really like you know. So I think that there's like a level like these. It just has to be like a complete like it's got to be defined. So it's like, here's all the crimes that we're cool with going through an automatic
like
sealing
after a time period.
After a time period. Here's the ones that have to go through a petition. Here's the ones that no matter what have to go to an oral hearing.
Yeah, and then here's the ones that like just no. Because like for instance, in North Dakota law right now, if you are convicted of an offense where you have to register as an offender against children or a sex offender, like you cannot try to seal your record that conviction. I mean, so there's already those, which I'm assuming that would stay the same, you know, that's going to be one. But I mean, the process though, it can be burdensome because like you guys said, I mean, this is a process where, and I'm not just saying this because I'm an attorney and I want people to contact me, but there's a lot of things that are involved in the forms and what you have to submit to the court, and you get kind of one shot at it. I mean, then you got to wait 3 years and you can't appeal. So it's kind of like you got to put your best foot forward. It's kind of an overwhelming process, I would think, to someone that has no legal experience. And so it's like you almost like kind of, I mean, have to get an attorney, but then, well, you don't have to. Like you gave an example of someone that did it on their own. You can, but it would be difficult.
If you don't pull it off, you have to wait
3 years.
Is it 3? Okay,
yeah, to try again. But then this is the criminal, and another important thing about sealing criminal records, this is something where you can't apply to the court for like a public defender to help you on this. You're not eligible. So even if you were represented by a public defender during your case, like let's say you get convicted of a misdemeanor, now it's been 3 years, you want to try to seal it, and you had a public defender then. Well, you can't apply for a public defender, and that public defender can't help you then seal this record because it's like a whole new matter. You have to go hire your own attorney, which then has the monetary, issues. So it then becomes, unattainable for some people just because of the monetary factor.
If people are interested, because we don't have a ton of time, but just if people are interested in like, hey, I want to at least just see, maybe not go through the whole process. Like, is there do you guys offer like free consultations? Is people to say, hey, you mentioned you had a questionnaire. Like, is there something people can do to at least start and try to see if it's something they could do? Yeah,
I would think any attorney that does criminal record sealing, I mean, again, I don't want to speak for them all, but a lot of attorneys do like free consults and things like that. I I mean, I know I do initial consultations if someone contacts me and they're interested in trying to seal a criminal record. I mean, usually I do like a 15-minute phone call with them, just to gather more information. Usually ahead of time I can look it up and see, and I have a pretty good idea of whether they qualify. But then the problem is like, you still got to like ask the questions because they could have been charged with or convicted of something in a different state in the meantime. So there's certain questions that have to be asked. I mean, a lot of people do, and if they do charge for a consult, I mean, they'll tell you that. But just because you consult with an attorney doesn't mean you're obligated to hire them, or to go forward.
Yeah, I think the only time I've ever been charged for has either been business related, because there's going to have to be some kind of in-depth meeting. It's going to take an hour or whatever, or family law. Like those two seem to be the ones that they'll want something a little upfront. And even when I did the family law stuff or whatever, it was like $100. So it was, I mean, I understand it's not affordable for everybody, but it's, $100. I mean, it's easy to spend $100. So it's like, don't spend it, use it.
Yeah, and then it depends too what you're trying to seal. I mean, if someone's trying to seal Class B or A misdemeanor, and that's the only thing they have on their record, and it's doesn't really have a victim. I mean, I'm going to use the example like theft. I mean, yes, technically, like the store is the victim. Let's just say Walmart, whatever. But like, is Walmart really going to respond like to the? Probably not. So that one is going to be an easier one for an attorney to do, and versus then someone who has a felony that has the victim, and then the person had like other stuff after the fact, and then the time period's run, and now we're trying to seal it. Like that's going to be a harder, more in-depth process too. Yeah. So it just kind of depends like what someone's trying to
it's funny
seal.
To bring up Walmart. I was at Walmart the other day, and I paid for my stuff, which I was actually kind of pissed because they wouldn't let me use my card. It was like a cash only whatever. And I was like, luckily I had cash on me. But anyways, so I paid for my stuff. I'm like walking out, and like I look over to my left, as people are like coming out or whatever. Like you're not supposed to come out. Like you can, but usually it means you didn't go through, right? And this guy's like I was like, I see that walk, like and he's got like a full cart. And he like walks past the guy who's like at the front or whatever. And the guy at the front, I don't know if he was just like daydreaming, like looking around or whatever. But he just like, walked right past him with like a full cart of like a TV and like all this stuff. And then I just like sat there just watching him like go out the store or whatever. And nobody, like the alarms didn't go off, like nothing. Gets over to his car. I was such a snoop. Like I was just like, and then he just like throws all the stuff in this vehicle and he takes off. And I just like look around. And I was like, nobody even noticed it. You know what I mean? And so I was just like, well, I mean, they got cameras everywhere, so I didn't feel like, I mean, if they're gonna get them, they'll get them,
And you don't really know.
And I don't know. Maybe he did. Maybe he went
know.
through layaway. Do they still have layaway at Walmart? I don't know. I don't want to get involved. But he did like lock eyes with me when he walked out, and I was like, I think he recognized me, and I was like,
help me.
Hopefully, I'll see you one day, bro. So. I was very uncomfortable.
And I didn't say Walmart to target Walmart. I just, bigger, I mean, it's just, if you have a bigger corporation is like your victim versus like an individual, like odds are Walmart's not going to care about me, if I'm trying to seal like a theft of $500 from 5 years ago. I don't think Walmart's going to care to respond,
They probably won't even see it.
Yeah. Who knows what their legal department even will do. But an individual like that would be, potentially a different story. It just depends.
Most of the people that I've heard that have pursued petitions to seal they've all been, for the most part, if they fit the criteria, have been granted. So it's having that letter, from the judge saying you've been rehabilitated is a big deal, because there's actually people who, because of their crimes and because of the severity of them or how the amount of them, that are deemed ineligible for rehabilitation. And especially for people in recovery, that sucks. Because if you can't get that like classification of rehabilitation, and I don't even know where there's like a definition of like of it somewhere in Century Code. But I know a guy who was like trying to be a peer support. He's been sober for a long time, and part of his job was like a Medicaid reimbursement. And then once they ran the background check, they had to like let him go, which is funny because he's now a counselor for the Department of Corrections. You know what I mean? Right. So even though he's been like deemed ineligible to be rehabilitated, he's working in a place called the North Dakota Department of Corrections and Rehabilitation. Right. But his job cannot be Medicaid reimbursed because he is deemed, ineligible.
That's federal.
And so, and so it's like, it's a big deal, especially for those of us in recovery, because it's like it kind of brings closure to our life, and it's definitely worth it. So,
so I want to encourage everyone who's interested, contact Tracy. Are you just the only person at your law office, or does anyone?
So I'm at Barkus Law. I'm the attorney typically that handles criminal sealing, but there are other attorneys, in Fargo and throughout North Dakota that do it. And so I'm not the only one. I mean, there are other attorneys that do it. So I mean, you can.
Well, there's attorneys that do it, and then there's attorneys that are passionate about it. Like Tracy at Barkus Law.
We're not saying anyone particular.
Barkus Law PC. Call back. And plus the one thing that Tracy has going for her is she's been on the other side. So she was an assistant state's attorney for a long time, and knows how they think. So if there is going to be some kind of play on their side to try and get it denied or whatever, she's going to be able to see it a lot faster than someone who doesn't have that experience. So.
Yeah, and I've seen a lot of like taking no position on it, like from the prosecutor's office, where like we'll file a petition and then the prosecutor's office will file a response just saying they don't take a position on it, which that's fine because then it lets the judge, look at everything and make the decision. So I've seen that a lot too. I haven't gotten really a lot of pushback at all. I think although the law, it is confusing, I think it is, though, well-written in the sense that it gives time periods and things like that. So, again, it's not someone's trying to seal their record, like, 6 months after they, plead out. There's a lot of, criteria to meet to do this. So I think if someone is meeting the criteria, a lot of times, like, they have a legit, shot. It's not guaranteed, obviously, but it's,
The only time that I've seen where it was the gal who handled it herself or whatever, but she did get, I think she had Bailey as her presiding judge or whatever for the seal. But the state's attorney's office responded that they were against it being sealed, even though she fell into the criteria, and it was because of the argument that she was making of the reason she wanted it to be sealed. Right. And it was that it was like an assault that she had on her record a long time ago, and she was trying to become a nurse. And so that was their response, is that we feel uncomfortable with her sealing it if she's going to be working with vulnerable adults or something like that. And so even though they came in and said they were against it, the judge not disregarded it, but it accepted the petition or approved granted the petition, even though the state's attorney said that they were against it.
Yeah, because in the end, the judge has they make the decision. Their job is to weigh the, information in the petition, the information that then the prosecutor provides, the information any law enforcement or the victim provides, and then they
make the final judgment.
Yeah, then there's a set of criteria that they consider. Yeah, and then they make the call. So you could have a mixture of some in support, some not. In support of it, and the judge could grant it. I mean, they could deny it too, but it just, it just.
That was cool to see when she granted it, because I thought that she was going to follow suit with the prosecutors, and she didn't, and which was really cool. Plus, also that day, I was running for Cass County Commission at that time, and Bailey pulled me aside and asked me if she could sign my if she could be one of the signatures for me to. That was kind of cool.
Well, one more thing too I'll say about the criminal sealing thing is, it's not because I've gotten this question too before. It's not an opportunity to relitigate your case. So like I know people like obviously they have a conviction, like they feel like the court process wasn't totally fair for a reason, you know, or they should have gotten a better deal or better offer, or just something happened in their case that like they're upset about, which I get, like that's frustrating, but this process isn't like where we relitigate like the facts of the case. So like in a petition, like we're not going to argue the facts of the case. This is a process where you got to like own your shit basically, you know, like, and show your rehabilitation and like your employment and stuff since then. It's not to go back and say like this isn't really, you know, what happened. Like that's not the course process I would suggest. Yeah, that's not this process.
Yeah. Okay.
So just to
you
got to be ready to own your shit basically is kind of the way, you know.
You heard it here
Tracy
first.
just cussed.
Yeah, I did.
Yes,
I did.
But that's how I would describe it to people. Like I get like everyone's gonna have. There's gonna be frustrating parts of, you know, like I'm sure you have frustrations from cases when you were prosecuted, or you think
like when prosecutors stack charges.
Well, or just like a decision, that was made in your case.
Tracy,
Adam,
we're trying to wrap up.
Tell me your frustrations with the justice system.
Well, no, but like in your case where you're like this should have happened different, but. But in your petition, but you don't go back and like relitigate those in your petitions to steal, because it's just not going to get you anywhere.
Right.
So that's my suggestion to people. You just kind of have to like let that part go.
Yeah.
With this process, because that's not what this is.
Right.
It could turn that way real quick too.
Right,
especially
and somebody
if they
that's
deny
doing it on their own. Yes, like you know, you can really get into the weeds of starting to get into like the underlying facts and and that's not what I suggest doing.
Yeah.
Of course, people can do whatever they want though, but
and then
not my suggestion.
You also do not use my case or my ceiling as a reference point, because I should have. If they would have followed the law, I shouldn't have had them sealed. Right. Like that. It happened. I was the first one, and it happened so fast that they just like approved it. And then when that girl was going through hers, they told her that the reason she can't do it is because it fell within that time period of like 5 years. You committed another crime. So did mine. Right. But it was like overlooked or whatever. And personally, I like to think that they were like, do we want to make our stance with Adam? Let's do it with someone else.
Well, it's always hard when new laws come out too,
Yeah.
to figure out like what does the language, the legislature like put forward, like what does it really mean, you know? Like it's hard.
Yeah. So.
Well, Tracy, thank you so much for being on the show.
Yeah, thanks for coming today.
Awesome.
This was awesome.
Hopefully this is helpful to somebody.
Yeah, I think we should just have a whole F5 project like attorney show. Like this would be super engaging.
Adam is constantly
I'm
trying to spin off
none of
shows.
this is legal advice.
Yeah,
so I'm going to give that disclaimer.
She has to say that. It's
no one is my client.
This is 100% legal.
That's right. Yeah, 100%.
It's not. It is a guide.
Yeah. Well, on behalf of F5 Recovery Radio, I want to thank you all again so much for being here. Appreciate you. F5 Project, the Ridge Treatment and Reentry Center, and of course, GoAWayBear.com, our sponsors.
Which is spray deterrent for the justice system.
Oh my God.
I'm just kidding. It makes bears go away.
Well, have a great day in recovery.
And that's how the cookie crumbles.